But for now, I would very pleased to be able to introduce a fellow core team member of unit, Adrian Keet, who's going to be presenting about the 17 partnerships, the SDG 17. That's partnerships for the goals. So a very important and powerful subject. Are you there, Adrian?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. It's lovely to see you. So just to introduce you, so Adrian has a master's in engineering and management, and he's an enterprise software and in AI and a management consultant, developing leadership and with a strong interest in natural wellness, as well as being a mindful facilitator. So over to you, Adrian. We're really looking forward to hearing about your proposition for how we can develop SDG 17 partnerships for the goals.
Great. Okay, so while I'm sorting out my screen share, I would encourage people to have a little stretch and take a leaf out of Dr. Mark Cohen's book, and just get yourself comfortable, stretch your fingers, because I hope that my session will be interactive. Thank you, Christian, for taking the lead there. Okay, let's see what happens when I share my screen. All right, good. So I said it will be interactive. So I think most of us, being impact champions, most of us in the audience, and if some of us are not, I'll just give a recap on the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals. These were developed by the United Nations General Assembly as a blueprint for a sustainable future. So they came up with 17 goals that would help us achieve a more sustainable civilization sooner rather than later, because really there is no later. So I wanted to get some feedback from the audience with two questions. The first one is, feel free to type into the chat, which of these goals do you currently support and why? So per the intro from Brett, he kind of let the cat out of the bag. I will be talking about SDG 17, the partnership for the goals. I actually have a pet peeve with the way that the goals are arranged and how 17 is, or partnerships is left to the end, because for me, the partnership isn't really a goal in itself. The other goals are very good and they should all be supported. For me, 17 is really the how. How are we going to achieve all the goals? The UN themselves, they have this quote, they say that the SDGs can only be realized with strong global partnerships and cooperation, which kind of makes sense because no single individual, no single organization has all the answers. But by working together, looking at all the global goals as interconnected, we have a better chance of solving more problems. If we look at nature, we have plenty of examples. Everyone knows about how insects like bees and butterflies benefit from the honey, and in visiting the flowers, they help with the pollination process, which gives us fruit and vegetables. Also, we've got a good friend Nemo. So the partnership here is the sea anemone provides protection for our good friend, the clownfish, and in return, his waste becomes nutrients for the sea anemone. And it's interesting, the concept of waste is really a human construct, because in the natural world, it's circular. In nature, we also have some pretty unlikely partnerships. So when you look at this picture, I think your initial reaction is there's a prey and there's predator, there's food and someone who's going to enjoy the food. Actually, this is another example of a very good partnership. So the crocodile, whenever the crocodile needs a good flossing of his teeth, opens his mouth, and this plover bird comes and basically picks off all the meat scraps, and they work very well in partnership. So when you think about partnerships in the human world, we also have to look at some unlikely partnerships. So you might see some potential partners or organizations as predatory, and then you might see some organizations as a bit Yeah, weak or unprepared for partnerships, but we really need to break through those barriers. I have to say that there are some very good examples in terms of corporates partnering up with NGOs, but they tend to be the minority. In fact, when we looked into some statistics, we found that as many as 90% of NGO corporate relationships fail. I'm not saying this is an average. I'm saying that, probably close to the worst case scenario, but it's still not, even if you dial that down to 70, 60%, that's not very good. Now, the reason for this high failure rate, what we've seen and what we've researched is they really come down to, a distrust between the different organizations, lack of strategic clarity. There's a collapse of communication and also misalignment in reporting. So you can imagine that the listed corporates, they have very rigid and bureaucratic ways of reporting. They have metrics that they need to be accountable to their stakeholders, whereas the NGOs, these are guys on the ground who are very passionate about solving their problems, and they're probably too busy to be publishing all these reports, which is a shame because they both sides of the fence, they want to achieve the same impact goals. So what happens is that we see there's a lot of a lot of wasted time and resources and wasted opportunity for impact for the planet, for people, and also reputational degradation. So it's really, it's no fault of either parties. They just come from very different starting points in terms of their goals and objectives, their structures, their motivations, and their cultures. So excuses aside, I just wanted to illustrate what a 90% failure would mean. So that means essentially that only $1 out of every $10 of funding would result in the agreed outcomes. 1 out of every 10 candidate children in a rural community would get educated. Only 10% of the intended land area would be reforested. And just to really drive the point home, there's this goal for achieving climate neutrality by year 2050. Now we know that 2050 it's already too late. I think previous goals were 2030, but let's assume that 2050 was achievable. But if we operated with a 90% failure rate, can anyone guess? Can anyone do quick math to figure out if we were plodding along at 10% efficiency, like what year would we reach climate neutrality? So between now and 2050, we've got 30 years, about 30 years. But if we were only progressing at 10% efficiency, can anyone guess? Can you put in the chat box in the chat what year we would get to climate neutrality? So we have one guess there. We've got a few guesses. Yeah. Okay. Good. Right. By my calculation, we would get there by year 23-21. That is way too late. Okay. So we really need to be efficient. So when we look at planet positive partnerships, when we look at impact, there's really no room for wastage. So because me and my partners were very passionate about solving this problem, we looked at how we can make use of technology to facilitate partnerships. So we've been working on an online platform we call Plango. It's a wordplay on a few things, plan and go, planet, and also tipping our hat to the heroes in the NGO space. So we're working on a prototype called Plango, and the goal of Plango is to create a space, an online space where the different stakeholders in the impact space can connect, and they can form partnerships that are very open in communication. The goals and projects are scoped up in a way that both parties really understand what they're getting into. So I'll give you an example. I mentioned earlier that 90% of these partnerships fail. From my experience, I've come from the corporate world and I've also worked with NGOs, and they both work very differently. So in the corporate space, you'll hear about greenwashing, and there's also a journey in terms of sustainability where not all corporations are very mature. So what the platform aims to do is when we onboard the corporations, we perform an assessment to see where they are on their sustainability maturity. And then we try to understand which area of impact they're passionate about. So we make use of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals as a way for them to identify their area of impact. And for the NGOs who are being onboarded, we also perform an assessment to see how mature they are in terms of running their organizations, in terms of how they're reporting impacts, and how well they're managing their projects. So what the platform aims to do is also provide templates as a way for communications to be a bit more streamlined. And as we develop the platform further, we will be providing more educational and training tools for all stakeholders. So yeah, so we all know why NGOs would want to connect with sources of funding. But when we look at why companies would want to go beyond profit and look at impacts, looking at various reports, these have been proven that companies that go beyond profit and look at impacts, purposeful impact for people and for planets, we see a reported increase in share price, increase in sales, increase in productivity. There's also a decrease in employee turnover because especially millennials, and not just millennials, but I think everyone cares about working for a meaningful organization. So when they see a company that looks beyond profit, they're looking after their employees, they're looking after the community and the planet. There's less turnover, and there's better morale within the workforce. This also leads to a boost in the reputation. And also, according to a Bain & Co. report in 2021, brands that score higher on sustainability generate over 5 times the revenue growth of brands with a low score. So there are very good reasons why brands and corporations would want to go beyond profit and be a bit more meaningful in their existence. And the way to do that, not the only way, but a very good way of doing that, is to partner up with impact organizations, NGOs, impact entrepreneurs, because these are the guys closer to the project, closer to the problems on the ground, working in the communities, whereas the larger corporations are specialists in generating profit. And profit is not a bad thing to be focused on, but how you then make use of profit to support impact, this is really what we're trying to support. So, as I mentioned, Plango is still at its early stages. So just to give a view of what's ahead for Plango, the current leg of the journey, we're focusing on brands and NGOs. So when we further develop Plango, it will be a multi-stakeholder, multi-sector partnership platform. But in the first phase, we will be focusing on brands and NGOs. So a good example is working with Aqua Danone. They're a bottled water bottled drinking water company in Indonesia. And there are NGOs in Indonesia that provide safe drinking water to communities and also work on recharging the groundwater table, because, for example, in Bali, we're on an island, and as more water is extracted from the ground, the freshwater level starts to drop, and then there's danger of seawater coming in and mixing with the fresh water. So we have a few NGOs who are working to solve that problem, looking at recharge wells around the island. So it's in the interest of the bottled drinking water company to work with these NGOs, because if, well, one, for public reputation, and secondly, they effectively closing the loop for this resource, this drinking water resource that they're dependent on for their profits. So also in the current leg of the technology, we're working on the project scoping. So when two organizations get together, we provide an automated scoping template. So both parties are very clear about what their roles are, what the agreed budgets, timelines, and outcomes are of the projects. And then there's project tracking and reporting along the way, so that both parties keep the project on track as much as possible. And as we onboard more of the community, we will be working on the online community management to keep everyone engaged and familiar with the platform tools. And the first target market will be the APAC region, Asia Pacific. And then that will keep us busy into mid next year. So the next leg will then be looking at onboarding impact entrepreneurs, investors, and grant organizations, and then look at expansion beyond Asia Pacific. We'll also be looking at including more training modules, content and resource libraries, as well as building in PR, reputation, and communication tools. So this will be beneficial in terms of getting the word out there for individual organizations, as well as promoting projects that are delivering on impact. Also, I'll be looking at blockchain-based impact tracking. There are a few tools out in the market, and so we'll be looking at how to plan and design impact tracking into Plango. So how do we track it on an individual project basis? How do we track it for organizations? And also, how do we track it for individuals when they move from one organization to another? How do they have a personalized a blockchain profile that shows all the different types of impacts, potentially impact tokens that they've earned along the way, be it for plastic credits, social credits, carbon credits. And then for future legs, we'll be looking at mobile app version of the platform, more languages being available, as well as rolling out the blockchain features. And so I want to come back and focus on doing all this together, really. While I've presented Plango as a tool, I don't think that will be the only tool out there on the market in our impact space. So I just wanted to leave us with a quote. It's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And also I wanted to remind us before we give up hopes on our beautiful blue planet, let's choose partnerships before we spend all our time and resources on rocket ships. So that's what I wanted to share today, and leaving some time and space for some questions and answers. Okay. Right, I see some questions come through in the chat. All right. So we got a question from Vanessa. Could you please share an example that you have experienced where this approach has been successful? Just to unpack it a little more. Right. Okay. Okay. Yeah. From my experience. Okay, that's a good one. So I'm involved in a few community projects, and there's an infrastructure project I'm involved with at the moment. It's a road that connects two towns. And because of the COVID pandemic, all the funding, the government budget has been diverted to COVID-related, health expenditure. So this road has gone into disrepair, and so we've managed to revitalize that project through a partnership between the community, so people who use the road, through businesses who benefit from people having access to both sides of the road, and also the government. And the only way that has worked was spending a lot of time understanding the motivations of each stakeholder. So for the community, they want a safe road to use. For the businesses, they want to let the general public know that they have supported this project, so they gain a bit of PR. But they also want the community from both sides of the road to be able to access their business. And finally, the governments, their motivation is to provide infrastructure that's safe for the community, and also to look good to the voting public. So we had to understand, the motivations of each party, and ensure that we addressed, all their objectives, and also agree the communications and reporting, and make that very transparent, and making use of social media to communicate what we're doing, what we plan to do, what we're doing, and what we've completed doing. Okay, got another question from Joe. The road being owned and cared for privately, would that solve the issue on its own? Perhaps usage fees could be charged. Yeah, that's a good question, Joe. That road, the shortcut, is it's in gray area because the government is in the process of taking over the ownership. That's the other reason why the road's been left into disrepair. Again, because the community, the business owners, and the local branch of the government didn't want to hang around and wait for a final decision. We decided to come together and come to an agreement for a way to solve that problem. Right. Any more questions? Any verbal questions? You don't have to type it into the chat. I'm just checking the chat if I missed any questions. Nope. All right, we have some more questions. Which factors would national government willingness or non-willingness to support this incentive would have on Plango and the respective parties that this platform need to fully operate for now, but as well as future? Let me see if I understand that question. Sebastian, I might have to come back to that question while I read the other ones. A question from Hedda. How do you think we as a sustainability community and professionals can help solve the issue of trust and transparency that are currently such big barriers for strong collaborations? Yeah, that's a good one, Hedda. I think as part of onboarding the different stakeholders onto Plango, we have questionnaires to understand their objectives, and also where they currently are, their understanding of sustainability. And I guess one of our value statements is that we don't stand for greenwashing, and we also encourage organizations not to go down that path. So we do an assessment on the corporation side to understand what their how they currently operate, whether they've worked with any NGOs in the past, and on the NGO side we do the same. And then when we scope out the projects, we make use of templates and metrics that are as black and white as possible, so that there's no misunderstanding. And also with Plango, what we will be doing is rating each organization and project. So as you complete more impact projects, you earn reviews, and as your review and credibility goes up, it encourages you to be more accountable, be more transparent, because if you're able to get away with lack of accountability and transparency the first time, you won't get away with it long term. So in the same way that Airbnb and Uber partners get rated, all the stakeholders on Plango will also get rated. So and in the long term, as I mentioned about the use of blockchain for transparent, radical transparency, again, that's going to really encourage everyone to be honest and accountable in the space. Okay, question from Vanessa. If we did that well, what will the dollar impact? What will be the dollar impact? How do you measure success? Right. Yeah, good question. So, we're gonna, I think a lot of these challenges in sustainability can be quite overwhelming. So, what we plan to do is on a project by project basis. So we'll start with projects between, as I mentioned, between brands and NGOs, and we scope out the objectives. So an example of an intended outcome is, for every $100 of funding that goes into this project, how many rural children are we providing education for? So the impact will be measurable. In terms of the dollar value for the corporation, I think that that's something that requires a bit more thought, and is also up to the corporation, which we can help them with. As I mentioned, with improved reputation, you're going to attract more consumers. You're going to retain your staff and improve staff morale. So all those have existing ways of quantifying, which is not the space that we're going into. As I said, our focus is to make sure that every impact project delivers on its intended goals. Okay, I'm just conscious that I'm running over time into the next speaker's slot, and I really appreciate all these questions. I'm just going to check in with Brett if I'm allowed to continue. 1 second. Brett, are you there? All right. Yeah, if I haven't addressed your question properly, feel free to get in touch. I don't see the other speaker online yet. So yeah, I'm happy to keep the room open to,
I have a question. Adrian,
Yep.
I have a question for you. Christian speaking. like you were talking about KPIs and measuring like impact and also measuring sustainability. Do you have already like some best practices? First part of the question. And second, did you see the impact as a service presentation we had on the master's course? And if so, like, is this something you are going to implement similar or the same? So first thing, best practices. Second, impact as a service.
Yeah, so in terms of best practices, so we'll be making use of existing standards such as GRI reporting, but we also want to take an approach where the project partners can decide. So when the project partners come together, they'll make use of a template that we provide to encourage them to be as measurable as possible with the project outcomes. And so we want to allow them to have flexibility on a project by project basis. There are standards, in terms of whether you're dealing with material recoverability, carbon sequestration, or social or community-based metrics that need to be taken into consideration. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel, but just automate existing best practice. So automate and also customize on a project by project basis. And your second question, yes, the impact as a service presentation is, yeah, I did attend that presentation. It was very interesting, and that will be in the next leg of our journey in terms of looking at how we record impact on the blockchain. So it's not in the current leg of our journey, where we're quite busy focusing on the user experience. So spending time with the real users in the impact space, NGOs and impact organizations on one side of the user base, and then brands with funding, with a CSR budget, who want to support these initiatives. But for sure, something like that the blockchain organization impact as a service is very interesting. So I will be reaching out to them to see how we can make use of what they have.
Okay, cool. And like you as Plango, are you like following the sustainability goals? Do you have that integrated in your goals, vision, mission? And how easy is that? Like if you talk about, I don't know how many partners you are in there, like how easy is the communication and agreement on these topics if you do that on a like smaller scale consulting firm?
Great question. So actually, the main goal that we're focusing on is the partnership. So Plango effectively is a platform to supercharge planet positive partnerships. And by doing that, we're facilitating everyone, with the individual genius as an organization, as a person, to come together and create this collective genius so that we can achieve all the sustainable development goals. And what we plan to do as we develop the platform is also to have an SDG tracker to see how much impact against each SDG we have contributed to as an online partnership community.
Cool. I mean, I can continue. I have a bunch of questions.
Yeah, feel free to. I think, given I don't see the speaker in the room, I think the next presentation will be in 15 minutes. So yeah, feel free to jam with questions, or and anyone else who has better answers than me, or you want to correct me on some facts, feel free to do so. I don't pretend to be the owner of all knowledge. So it's also an open space for you to let us know, because we're building this platform to I guess make the world a better place. So if you want to be part of that process, send through your feedback. So yeah, Christian, feel free to ask more questions.
Yeah, like if I have a venture, I mean, we are kind of like either self-employed, or most of us are like, we are part of small organizations. Some of us are also working with like customer bases, bigger organizations. And like my customers, they are pretty much already in that sustainability business. But myself, I've never really thought about it. So like, is it easy to like, how to connect with the UN? Do you just grab it off your website and put it on your own website, or how is the process? What would you recommend somebody like who is a one-man show or a two-man show or like a smaller organization to integrate and implement these sustainability goals, not only on the website, but also in their behaviors?
Yeah, great question. So the platform, while we want to facilitate partnerships on the platform, we also want to create an online space where people can learn more about being on the journey. So we'll be providing training, we'll be providing recorded content, we'll be providing masterclasses and live online networking, so the community can learn from each other. And so to your question, how does someone, for example, prove that they are really making an impact for goal number 3 or 5? So there'll be content that we provide on how they can do that, or who they can work with to do that. Because again, it's not about one person knowing the answer or just reading some material and knowing it, but working together, 1 + 1 = 3 or 5. So we'll be connecting them with content. We'll also be connecting with other impact champions who are on the same journey. And in terms of getting certified, we can provide training material, but also connect them to organizations that provide the accreditation and certification. But in my view, it's only personal opinion. I think not all organizations need to go through that that type of certification. Depends on where you are on your journey and the size of your organization. And sometimes, I guess the other objective of Plango is to democratize the ability to demonstrate your good work, as opposed to having to go to an organization to get accredited. People can see, like, through your actions that you're doing what you say you want to do, as opposed to just getting a badge.
That sounds that there's a little bit of money involved to go ahead. So like to do that with an organization using the platform, I can see that there's effort on your side, the platform. Is there already like a model for, and again, I'm talking about like one-man shows and like small organizations who want to like integrate that in their behaviors. Is there like a ticket size, like if you want to do that, use the accreditation platform, because it's a good marketing thing.
Yeah, that's right. So if I get your contact details, I can send you the subscription model when we're ready to circulate that. But you're right, there is a revenue model involved. It's pretty light on the NGO side, because we want to onboard them with as little friction as possible. But on the brand side, the revenue is derived mainly from the brands and corporations, because the logic there is, what they spend on the platform increases the probability of project success and also impact verification.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah. Makes sense. Cool. So we have 10 minutes for the next speaker.
Okay, so the next speaker will be in 10 minutes. You're right.
Yeah. So maybe like everybody takes a little break, and then we come back in about like 7-8 minutes.
Yeah, let's do that. So the next speaker will be on the topic of creating impact through alchemical storytelling and art. That sounds very interesting. So a nice change from our theme so far, but still an impact. So yeah, if I need to take a break myself, so I'm going to go on mute and turn off my video for 8 minutes, and hopefully see everyone back in time for the next speaker slot. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adrian.
Oh, 1 second before I go, I will leave my contact details in the chat so you can get in touch with me. And yeah, thank you again for all the very good questions and your interest.
Thank you, Adrian.